Welcome everyone. Time to start today's webinar. Wish everyone happy International Biodiversity Day and welcome to our second monthly webinar following the State of Europe's Forest Report 2025. The title of today's webinar is Do Europe's Forests Suffice? Forest Resources and Carbon Sequestration. First, some short information before we head into our panelists. Some short information about the State of Europe's Forest 2025. So, State of Europe's Forest Report is the flagship product of Forest Europe and has been published regularly since 2003. It provides a comprehensive analysis of the status and trends of forest resources across Europe with data dating back to the 1990s. And the purpose is to track progress towards sustainable forest management by monitoring 6 specific pan-European criteria: forest resources and carbon, forest health, productive functions, biological diversity, protective functions, and lastly, socio-economic functions. And the report is an extensive and collaborative effort involving 45 member states and UN agencies, the UN agencies, UNECE and FAO, to compile harmonized and validated forest statistics. And the report also serves as central reference for policymakers, scientists, and the public to support evidence-based forest policy development. So the work for the 2025 report was led by the European Forest Institute on behalf of Forest Europe and with cooperation with the UNECE and FAO. Data was collected with the help of experts and national correspondents from 45 member states based on national forest inventories, registers, and official statistics. It was collected via 2 surveys and through a joint digital interface. It was also synchronized with FAO's Forest Resource Assessment 2025 to ensure uniform definitions and to avoid double reporting. And data has also been sourced from external international data providers such as the Joint Research Center and Eurostat and U4Gen. And going into today's webinar, it will be moderated by Dr. Kari Korhonen, research manager at the National Forest Institute Finland, LUKE, and he's also the chair of the board of the European National Forest Inventory Network, ENFIN. And in addition to Dr. Korhonen, we will also get the opportunity to hear experts from 3 different European organizations presenting their views and discussing interesting questions with our moderator. So today you will meet Dr. Michael Losch, who's coordinator for bioeconomy in European Commission's DG Agriculture and Rural Development. We will also hear from Mr. Sven-Erik Hammar, who's the president of the Confederation of European Forest Owners, and also Mr. Jori Ringman, Director General of the Confederation of European Paper Industries. And with that short introduction for today, I will hand over to our moderator. So please, Kari, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rekka. And I will first share my presentation. I hope you can now see it. So, dear webinar organizers, panelists, dear participants, I firstly want to thank the organizers for inviting to moderate this very interesting webinar. My introduction speech, it will be very much summarizing the key findings of the State of Europe's forests on these indicators: forest area, growing stock, carbon, increment and fellings. And almost everything that I will have on my slides, they are almost direct quotations from the report. I know that you all have studied very well this 225-page report. The intention of my presentation is just to repeat and highlight these key findings on these indicators. Starting from the very baseline indicator forest area, first note on that is that we have a very good data coverage for this indicator, thanks to the national forest inventories that almost every EU country and where most of the European countries do have already existing the national forest inventory that produce this baseline information on forest area in a regular manner. And my one finding is that of the report is that the forests cover 35% of Europe's land area, but there is large variation between regions and between countries on the percentage of forest cover. And the highest percentages being in the north and the lowest shares of forests in the central West Europe and Central East Europe. Forest area has increased since the 1990 by 11% and has been increasing still during the last years. Part of the increase is explained by improved data. During the last decade, many countries have started with NFIs producing more accurate information on the forests. But most of the area increase is real. It has really happened. It's not only because of improved information contents. Second, a very baseline indicator, growing stock, also does have a good data coverage. It's well known in many countries due to these national forest inventories. Observation on the growing stock is that the current value in European forests is almost 40 million cubic meters, which is of course quite difficult number to understand without any scale. But one very important factor or fact is also that 79% of this volume of growing stock is in forests that are available for wood supply, that can be used for wood supply. Also, the growing stock volume has increased. It has increased by 1.3% each year between years 1990 and 2025. But this pace has slowed down in the latest years. In the latest 5 years, the increase has been on average 0.3% per year. Overall, in Europe, the growing stock is 45% higher than in year 1990. And the visualization infographics on the right-hand side of this slide shows the increase of cubic meters per hectare forest during the last 5 years. So it has increased from 169 cubic meters per forest hectare to the current 171.5 cubic meters per hectare. And one quite interesting observation is also that the volume of growing stock of broadleaf trees, both broadleaf species, has increased faster than that of the coniferous species. Then moving to the next indicator, forest carbon, that is of course strongly correlated with the volume of growing stock. Like the growing stock volume, also the carbon stock in European forests is increasing. It has increased. It's representing a significant sink of CO2 emissions. When comparing the annual sink of sequestration of CO2 in the forests, it is now lower than in the in the earlier reports, but still on the positive side, forests are still sequestrating CO2 from the atmosphere, which is sometimes forgotten, but should be kept in mind. There is partial evidence, according to the report, that of a decline in the sink function, primarily due to natural disturbances, increased harvesting, and climate-related stress that reduce forest growth, and also due to age class distribution, which is not specifically mentioned at this point of the report, but it's quite well brought up in the other parts of the report. One interesting fact is that the living woody biomass, the volume, the stem wood volume represents only about 30% of the total carbon stock in forests, and the soil carbon is actually more than 50%, like 55% of the total carbon stored in forests. Of course, these numbers are very dependent on how we define the soil, how deep in soils we go, but the main message here is that the soils are very important part of the forest carbon stock is quite evident. My last indicator, and the last indicator in this webinar, is the increment and fellings, and the ratio of these is, of course, the very important factor for the carbon sequestration in the forests. And finding fellings amount to around 81% of the net annual increment. So net annual increment is the amount of stem wood that is what the trees in forest are every year growing, minus the natural mortality, natural dying of trees. So the increment is in the latest years has been about 20% units higher than the fellings. And this is in accordance with the finding that the forest resource amount of growing stock is increasing because the fellings are lower than the increment. There has been short-term peaks in the fellings because of the fact that some of the part of the fellings are associated with disturbances. That means removing of those dead or dying trees from forest to avoid further damages. And additional information taken from Eurostat on the annual fellings or annual removals of timber from the forests, which is shown in the lower right-hand corner of this slide. They show that the years 21 and 22 have been the peaks in removals, and after that there has been some reduction in the annual fellings or removals because the damages in those years, in the latest years, has not been as severe as those peaking years 21 and 22. This was my introduction to this topic, and next in the program we have the speeches notes from the panelists. So I welcome Sven-Erik Hammer from Forest Owners Confederation next to give his notes on this.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for the invitation to this very important seminar. And I will also share some slides here. Very good. Well, from CEPF side, we welcome this report very much. As an European organization representing forest owners, this report is important to illustrate one of our key messages, that despite the increasing frequency and intensity of natural disturbances due to climate change and the increasing complexity of making decisions with regard to sustainable forest management, forests continue to deliver, to provide the multifunctional role and bring that the forest bring to society with regards to economy, environment, and social benefits. But this is becoming increasingly challenging, especially regarding the climate environmental policy that were developed under the Green Deal period. And we will certainly use some findings and certainly key indicators from this report in our daily work. And if I then go into some of the details, European forests have grown faster than they have been harvested for the last 35 years. The total growing stock is now 35% higher than in 1990, and annual felling is 2020 amounted to just around 85% of net annual increment. This is a very important fact. And the rising mobilization of wood resources and utilization rate has to be properly assessed. This reflects the impacts of climate change as well as the growing demand for renewable wood and substitute for fossil-based materials. And I want to be very clear that the growing demand and growing substitution when we use renewables instead of fossils is something very positive, both for the climate and for Europe. And as the report states, it does not reflect an overexploitation of the resources. If I then go to the carbon stock and wood production, the report identifies multiple interacting causes for the deceleration in carbon stock accumulation, among which climate-driven disturbances are prominent. For decades, forests of sequestered carbon is an increasing manner and strongly contributed to offsetting emissions from other sectors. However, this scenario cannot be taken for granted forever. Today, the age structure of forest and climate change make that forests still fulfill their role, but to a lesser extent. Therefore, there needs to be an actionable response in form of adapting forest management and ensuring future forest resilience. And the substantial carbon stock documented in the report is a product of decades of sustainable forest management, combining harvesting, regeneration, and reducing this management or setting aside large area does not guarantee a stronger carbon sink, especially in a changing climate. And in these regards, we also must see the forest as the foundation of a growing bioeconomy, and I will come back to that. When it comes to salvage logging, it is an essential part of the forest management, and the only thing we know that the uncertainty we have today is that we will not know more in the coming decades. But salvage logging is a part of the broader SFM adaptation picture, and we need to look upon it in that matter also. And forest owner also need to have an operational freedom to manage in this regard. So the conclusion is that the State of the European Forest Report is of highly importance for the European forest sector and the community, and forests continue to deliver the multiple services that we can provide to society despite the increased challenge climate change. And forests are precious asset in the very, very uncertain times we are today to make Europe healthy, resilient, and autonomous. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sven-Erik. And then I invite Dr. Michael Loss from DG Agriculture and Rural Development, European Commission.
Hello, everybody from Brussels. I will also now. Okay.
Fine.
So it's fine now? Yeah. So yeah, welcome again from my side. We also very welcome the report, State of Europe's Forest 2025, which and the work of Forest Europe. I think it's extremely valuable to put together not only EU member states, but all the countries of the European continent. And we will have our large ministerial meeting in just a bit more than 1 week. So this was really also a key work of the Swedish chairmanship to bring together this report. The report, the European report, the Forest Europe report, is made in very much close cooperation with FAO data, with the Global Forest Resource Assessment. That's why I start here. You see the report of FAO came out in October, end of October last year. It's basically the same data. There are some additionals, and I think it's always good to start from the global picture, which is like it is. You see here the annual forest area change from 1990 to 25. And you see that we have really a big deforestation problem in the tropical sphere, in Latin America, in Africa, Indonesia. On the other hand, so all these countries here in red, if you look at Europe, Asia, and North America, we see that there is a net area growth in forestry, as confirmed then also in the European data. So it's really this picture. I think it's important to see that the world is divided, that we have a serious problem globally, but we are on a good track in Europe, also in Asia, if you look at China, for example, and also North America. If I go on here, you know, one of the key policy issues and reasons behind the debate we are also having is the EU bioeconomy strategy that we worked out and presented also end of last year. This is a strategy which tries to show the way forward with lead markets and in areas where biomass can substitute fossil materials. So it's very focused on lead markets such as construction, classic for wood, but also plastics. Think about bioplastics or packaging material and several chemicals, biorefineries. So there is a lot of markets where we can and we have to reduce our fossil footprint. So defossilization is here the keyword. And if we look here, that's data from the JRC, our EU Joint Research Center, Knowledge Center. We see that we have primary supply, secondary, tertiary supply, and we see that forestry plays a role in this primary supply of about 33%. In the secondary supply, that's mainly the defined as wood processing byproduct, so that's pure forestry, and then we have the recycling of wood and paper. Altogether, forestry biomass represents 41% of total biomass supply in the EU. The slightly larger part comes from agriculture, classic agriculture biomass and residues. But forestry plays a key role, more than 40%, in our bioeconomy aspirations to get out of fossil materials. So, of course, there's a tension then, but I want to reiterate first, there are expectations to have more, to have some more harvesting, to use more, to have more biomass, and to see, of course, there's trade, there's the possibility of international trade. So as long as it comes from the green countries in the first slide, it looks okay, but we have to be aware that imports from the tropical areas, that can be a dangerous thing. That's also why the EU designed the EU deforestation regulation, which will enter into application end of this year with a lot of simplifications, but that should give some guarantees on this side. And in the EU, you see here the harvesting rate, as has been said by Kari in the beginning. The SoEF report calculates an overall of 81% of harvesting in relation to the net yearly increment. So we are clearly below 100%, which is a positive sign. So we are not over exploiting the forests. Of course, there should be can be some safety margins, but this seems pretty safe. And also, when you look at here, I have the data from Eurostat. Eurostat is now working on the basis of amended regulation, which included a lot of new data, a complete new forestry module since last year. Actually, the first time we have now much more concrete data for the EU member states and also some non-EU member states. And you see here very detailed data on basically all years, 5 different years. Just look at the last, the light brownish part. You see that, we had in Estonia above 100%, but for example in Czechia it came down below 100% after having surpassed 100% in 2022. So all other member states are safe below the 100%. So it's really sustainable. And I don't say that Estonia is unsustainable. Then you go into the reasons, and of course there's salvage logging there as, but that's always a good point of departure to look at the figures. So harvesting. There seems to be some room, some positive message here. If you see also member states who are way below 40%, 50% of harvesting, so we are in a good zone, and it's also important to keep forests in an age class where it maximizes also the carbon sink. If we look at the carbon sink,
30 seconds, please.
Okay. Oh well. Okay. If you can give me one more. Here you have the carbon sink, which shows that the sink is smaller, the green part. But what for me is very interesting is, first of all, it's stabilizing. This shows also the figures of 24, and we have the dark green part, which means we have the potential to transform a bit more maybe of the standing forest in harvested long-term wood products. That is also a sink. And for our discussion, then it's really whether to achieve the EU LULUCF target for 2030. That will be a difficult thing. There were a lot of expectations on LULUCF on forests some years ago, which are now seeing the problems a bit difficult. There is a differentiated picture here. It's not in this was the sum of all member states. Here you see on the right top how it's different, how, for example, Germany, Austria were net emitters even, but then still Spain, France, Italy were very good sinks, Romania. So this came then to the overall peak. So we need a very differentiated approach. And here we have some risks taken from the SoEF report. Insects, diseases, wildlife, storm, fire. So I think that's also a very valuable contribution of this SoEF report to investigate the damages, the trends. Always important to start for an informed debate with good data. So I stop here my slideshow. And just to say, last word, it's so important that we work together here in Europe, also beyond EU boundaries, with our neighbors on sustainable forest management. And Forest Europe is the forum, and we are happy to contribute as Commission and EU, as one of the more than 40 signatories of Forest Europe, to a common, voluntary but consensual bottom-up approach towards sustainable forest management. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, for this very interesting speech. And then I will invite Jori Ringman from Confederation of European Paper Industries. You are welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation for this, like it was said by colleagues, very important webinar to celebrate the achievement of getting this report together. I'm actually connecting today from my home in the Belgian countryside in the middle of the Natura 2000 forest, and it seems that exactly today when I was supposed to be on the webinar, the internet is doing much worse than the forest next to me. So I'll switch off my camera for the time I'm speaking. Apologies for that, but it's for the stability of the connection. Maybe to start with, I would like to remind that the industry, paper industry, has been a sustainability driver for a very long time in our own operations, but also in the value chain. And in the value chain, in particular, we have been pushing for certification in Europe. And I think that is one of the explanations for these very positive results that we see in this report. And I think it's important to remember that there are tools that make this happen. So it's not just by chance that we have these very successful KPIs that we can share today. Having said that, I think it's also good to remind ourselves that sustainability is never ready. So the more we do in sustainability, the more we understand. And of course, we understand that we have to do more. So we are never there. But it's still always useful to stop for a moment, look at where we got to, and be proud of what we have achieved, because that is also encouraging us going further. And that is important today as well. So the trend is positive. Every day in this area, the day has been better than yesterday. That is very positive. And we can see that in this report, and we saw it also in the report 5 years ago. So that's a really good starting point. It's also important to say, as we heard from Kari and Sven-Erik and Mikael before, that the Europe forest keep on maintaining a positive wood balance. So in my visualization, I gathered some success KPIs. So we already heard from the others that the forest area and the growing stock keep growing, and that means that we continue to have net carbon sink in the forest. There's also positive trend in biodiversity, and importantly, at the same time, we have been able to support the economic and social pillars of sustainability with 4 million made in Europe jobs. But of course, it's not only successes, we also still have challenges, notably the climate extremes and expanding and sometimes conflicting expectations on forest. Nevertheless, the balance is still more on the success, and I think that's what we have to take away with us today from this meeting. But the past successful record can give us also the confidence to trust that we can maintain and enhance forest resilience. But it will require that we diversify forest structures, have risk-aware management, and have long-term strategies that anticipate climate impacts rather than react to them. And with that, the proactive and adaptive forest governance, the sustainable forest management, remains essential. These are also the key messages that we will continue to communicate as SEPI, as industry, in the value chain as well, together with the many partners there, as we have done in the past 5 years since the publication of the previous report. And that is because we want to build our advocacy on evidence and on reliable sources. And if there's one reliable source, I believe Forest Europe is one of those. Well, with that in mind, we can also trust that the climate positive contribution of forest and the value chains can continue. And with that, I would like to share a very recent study published just less than a month ago by Nkasi and done for WBCSD. So it's not done for the industry, it's not done by the industry, so it's neutral and independent. But what it says clearly is that the key value chains have a significant potential for avoiding the growth of fossil emissions. And that is already really significant. We have done similar studies in Europe, and then of course the numbers are a bit different depending on who is doing the studies, but what is important is that the scale is very similar. And in this NCASI study, the outcome is that the forest-based products are currently avoiding 1.6 gigatons of CO2 equivalent emissions. And it's difficult to understand these big numbers. I admit that myself as well, but to understand the scale, that means the size of half of EU's annual emissions that were avoided. Or you could say it in another way, that we avoided having added the emissions of over 200 million new heavy consumers to the world economy every year because of the contribution of these forest-based products. So having this substitution continuing, having the harvesting of the wood continuing, and having the sustainable harvesting and forest management continuing is very important. And actually, this is what the International Panel of Climate Change has been telling us from the very beginning of their first reports until now, to say that you have to have sustainable forest management, you have to keep on harvesting and using the harvested wood for areas where you can actually avoid new fossil emissions. And that's the encouraging part that I would like to finish with. And it's what also we heard from Michael, that this defossilization is a key driver for achieving the very ambitious goals of the EU. And with forest value chains, we can contribute to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for Jori and for all panelists. And then we are moving to the discussion part, and we have some questions that have been prepared in advance, and I think I will start because we sometimes don't have the time enough. I start with a very crucial question in my mind that relates now to this fact that we have observed that the sequestration of forests in Europe is slowing down. Sequestration of CO2 in forests in Europe is slowing down. And now, knowing that it's inevitable, we cannot avoid it, that at some point of time, Europe's forests will no longer continue to be a net sink. They will become a source of CO2. That is something that we cannot avoid, no matter if we protect all the forests or if we continue with the harvestings. And of course, that has an impact on what time span this will happen. But knowing this, and after hearing all these presentations that you have given, how do you feel? What is your opinion on this? And that having this background, should there be any specific policy actions at European level or at country level to increase the carbon stocks in forests at any cost, or should we rather accept this development of lowering CO2 sequestration in the forests? Maybe I ask you, each of you, give your comment on this crucial question. So perhaps when Erik, you start in the same order that as you presented the notes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I must say a bit. I really do disagree a bit with your perspective here that we can't do anything, because there is of course a risk that climate change affects our forest, and it is unpredictable by nature. But there is also a risk in not doing anything, or doing it too late when it comes to active management to adapt to this climate change. So active management is really a key here, where we have younger stands that are more vital against climate change. And the other part of the question, should we have regulation that no matter the cost brings carbon stock up? And my question to that is a clear no. And we can see also the LULUCF regulation today, where if you put it very simple, we have today EU regulation that is depending on the weather, and we can't have it like that. We can't have that kind of focused in one single aspect, because we need to look at climate change mitigation, adaptation, and also bioeconomy taken together, and look at it in where can we capitalize on the synergies within all these aspects. So no regulation that only focus on carbon storage. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, if I would like to comment in on this, I would agree that we need, and the strategy of the European Commission also focuses here on sustainability and also on resilience, a lot on resilience. We have seen also from the figures that we are not in a bad situation in Europe. We have growing forest area and growing forest stock within the area, so it's a double plus in a way. But the multiplier, it has been bigger in the past. Let's put it like this. So the trend is negative, but we are still on a positive side, and there is a big expectation that forestry basically compensates the yearly carbon sink, compensates our probably inability to achieve net zero in other areas. So that's maybe that expectation that it's the solution for not being able to get to net zero in transport or in some hard to abate industry. I think that's a bit of a lot of expectations to private and public forest holders, and that's currently, I think, the debate. But still, I would a bit disagree. I'm not such a forest expert by I'm a forest expert now, but Kari, what you said, that at some degree for that there must be a zero sink. I think it depends again on the soil, on the thing, but some sink can persist over time and must not go down. With first of all, there is some part which will not evaporate but build up also soil carbon, and with a right active forest management, one can also improve and maintain a good sink, a good yearly sink. So I would insist that we should not say we can forget the sink. We need the sink. We need to maintain a sink. And my message would also be, and what I wanted to show is that Europe is so diverse from the climate, from the soils, from the history. So there's so many differences, and it depends so much on regionalities, that we have to be very careful on the European level, and we respect also very much that forestry is primarily a national competence. There is no forestry chapter in the EU treaties, and of course we come in with EU acquis on environmental and agriculture acquis, for example. So there are there is activity by the Commission on European level, but we really, at least from DG Agriculture side and in the bioeconomy strategy, we try to see this as a support interference, a positive support to enable farmers and forest holders, for example, to engage in agroforestry or in afforestation measures. So there is the possibility to support this with the Common Agricultural Policy. Of course, there's always a debate. There's a lot of leeway for member states to define what exactly they will do, also in the Common Agricultural Policy. So it's not an obligation for each member state to do that. But so there is a lot of flexibility and a lot of instruments to support getting better here in an active forest management. I would completely underline that. And maybe as a last element, also on the research side, we are investing with Horizon Europe, and there will be at the start this year of a new European partnership for forestry and forest-based research, which will mobilize more than 200 million for forest-related research on sustainability issues. So I think that should be the positive encouragement, support, investment support, also demand side for more defossilization in the lead markets, while of course preserving sustainable forest management on the basis of what we have here with Forest Europe, but also keeping that fit for the future. So I think it's important to have a roadmap to constantly work on the latest also scientific knowledge to move ahead with sustainable forest management in this bottom-up, sustainable, consensual manner.
Thank you. Jori, how about your comment on this?
Well, first of all, I fully agree what the previous two gentlemen, Sven-Erik and Michael, have said. But maybe I would also add something from my side. So first of all, I think that the forests should not exist to compensate for the bad behavior of any other sector. So that's the key first starting point. So forest sink, if it exists, it's great. We can maximize that, we can optimize it, but it should not be in the calculations for any other sector. Like you mentioned, Michael, how to defossilize sectors. That's not the purpose of forest. Every sector has to reduce their own emissions, and we do that in paper industry, and other industries have to do that as well. Second thing is that we are now in the point where we are designing in the EU the climate policy for post-2030, and LULUCF is part of that. And I would really much hope, and that's also the view of SEPI, that in addition to bioeconomy, in addition to circular economy, there's really emergence of carbon economy, where we can actually find tools that help to maximize and optimize, for example, the forest sink, so that it's not only one big stick that is hitting on the head of those that emit, but there would also be rewards for those that actually do good things and incentives to do more of the good things, like forest owners. I'm sure there's still more that you can do in the forest if there's the right framework for that in what I would call carbon economy, that we have to have latest after 2030. But then also to the harvesting and use of the forest, where we have to find the right balance. Well, you can't balance what you don't measure, or you measure incorrectly. So there we have some policy recommendations very briefly that we can improve in this area. So first of all, updating the harvested wood product metrics to reflect today's recycling practices and long-lived products performance. That's a key. That is still not fully correct, and some parts of it is totally missing from the accounting. Second thing is that when people plan their operations and their consumption and their behavior, we need to have the footprinting methodologies that have fair calculations for forest-based products, including land use impacts and renewability and biogenic carbon. And final thing is that in the LULUCF categories, we have to incorporate also the substitution effects as a formal reporting category. What you measure, you can manage, and that applies also to climate policies, and that applies to also the nature, to the extent that we can't completely control nature, like Sven-Erik said, that we are also depending on the climate, on the weather, and we should not be also having unrealistic expectations on that, but we can still mitigate many of the problems. Thank you.
I just would like to come in a bit, not to be misunderstood. I think because you put a bit on my argument on top that for me goes a bit too far. Of course, Europe is committed to net zero, to the Paris Agreement, and to achieve a net zero emissions by 2050. I think that's something which is in the Green Deal, and this is the part which is really at the core, and which also this Commission clearly sticks to. So in the end, the target sharings, the in-between targets, the 2030 targets which are in place, and the 2040, the post-2030 which are currently under negotiation. I would say in the end, it's the legislators, it's the member states and the European Parliament who act on proposals of the Commission and who have to make the fine-tuning. And we have to see that the LULUCF targets, they are legal targets for 2030, which I showed. So there is it's not only an expectation, and then we can now discuss about whether it's unfair. It shouldn't be that it substitutes the others, but the fact is that there is a general commitment towards net zero, which is in place, and then member states make or agree upon the targets in the different sectors. And it was in the past agreed that the forest sector should contribute to a certain sink to maintain to be on track towards Paris. So whether that can be let's say adapted or must be adapted, it really depends. It's a complex also political situation. It depends a lot, as you say, I would say also on research and on technology and on innovation making. For example, if there is advancements in other sectors which make it easier for them and make it feasible for them to reach net zero, or with I also see the bioeconomy as part of these additional strategies, which take into account that that there is that there might be a better distribution, and we have to maximize the overall result towards net zero. And I also see the harvested wood products, and to have the forests in the right age to produce the zinc which we need, and also to have other measures, and seeing the bioeconomy as a contribution to substitute. So I think we are pretty much on the same side. But I would just want to emphasize that the commitment to net zero and the necessity of having a certain carbon sink in some areas is a realistic, I think, a necessity recognized on the political level.
Thank you for these very wide responses on a question that was maybe a bit provocative, but still I want to, even though the time is getting short, I want to present another question that, well, you can answer by one word if you like, or one sentence at maximum. What you see, if looking at 20-30 years ahead, what is the single biggest threat to Europe's forest carbon sinks? Sven-Erik, you can start.
I'll just say something shortly before answering. Sorry, you will get to answer these questions. So we will maybe continue a little bit after 1 o'clock, just so everyone has the chance to answer. Thank you.
But please, short answers.
It's a bit tempting to say EU rules, but I would like to go along a bit with Mikael's thinking that we need to take this into a bigger picture. We are now in a geopolitical situation where Europe is threatened when it comes to security, when it comes to competitiveness, and European forest is an asset of extremely highly value that if we use it wise, we can have good benefits to all European citizens, because the forest and the forest value chain that we have in Europe provides products and services that every European citizen needs in their everyday life today. And the thing is to put the question, how to make greater use of these forest resources today in today's situation. And then you need to take the different parts together. So we need to use it better, the forest resources. And I would also like to end by also addressing the forest owners and the managers behind the forests. There are always people behind, and there must be trust between the owners and the managers and the decision makers. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question now to with very brief answers, Michael and then Jori.
Well, I wouldn't now search for a big threat, which we saw the threats which are there. We saw the monitoring of them by Forest Europe, by the SoEF also, the diseases, the fragilization of the health through climate reasons, droughts, and so on. So to have the right species, to have the right mix, the right genetic material, I think it's manageable. It's active management. So I don't want to single out any of these threats. I still think, and that was also my message, going the same direction. In Europe, we are quite in a comfortable, still good situation. It can always be better, or it might have been a bit less. But we have to focus on the global scale, on the tropical rainforest, which we have to protect. And for me, it's always sometimes we have to have this differentiation when we make like we learned also in the Commission, and we had to make a lot of simplifications, and I think good simplifications now to the EU deforestation regulation. It was addressed primarily to tropical imports and to save the planet of not. We don't want to have a conversion in the Amazon away from the forest to soybeans, because we consume so many soybeans or whatever in Europe. So I think that should still be the focus on that.
Thank you. And Jori.
I try to be very short. So every time we use fossil products, we add CO2 to the atmosphere. So we have to stop that, reduce that, because the single one biggest threat in the next 20, 30 years is still going to be climate change. That is the short answer. And we have to do everything we can to mitigate climate change.
Thank you very much. And I was supposed to give a wrap-up of this discussion. I think I will pick up only a couple of very interesting comments. I very much like this view that came very well. First, I think there was that this report is highly appreciated. This State of Europe Forest Report. The data are in use. It's needed for the policy planning and monitoring. And then the importance of looking at the global scale. That is another second point that came evident from many comments from you. Looking at also other countries outside the Europe, and in Europe we are in a rather good situation regarding forests. Those are those couple of things that I can now summarize from this discussion, and then I give the floor to Rebecca to conclude this webinar. From my side, a lot of thanks to the liaison unit of Forest Europe for organizing this series of webinars. It has been an excellent idea to arrange these webinars. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kari, and also thank you to our panelists. And I want to also thank the audience and all the speakers here for attending and engaging in the webinar. I can also see that the chat has been very active, so thank you for your engagement there as well. The presentation slides will be shared afterwards, and also with the consent of the speakers, of course. And last but not least, I also want to remind everyone that the next SoEF webinar will be on the 17th of June. So there will be more information on the website about this. And with that, we close this webinar, and thank you again. Hope to see you all then on the 17th of June. Thank you so much.